All right.
Yep.
Give it a little second. Live from Shakespeare's Globe, I am Judson Clark with the Sweet Tea Shakespeare podcast, and I have the always charming Wade Newhouse, the director of Richard III, going up in Raleigh right now. And as of this recording, tonight they have a showing too. How are you doing, Wade?
Great. Everything is great and fun.
Absolutely. So I know this is not the traditional setup, but a little housekeeping for the all the listeners and watchers out there. Video killed the radio star. We are officially trying to move to video podcast. We're super excited about it. And unfortunately, this does have to take place on Zoom for this episode, but I'm willing and able to make these sacrifices to be able to talk with the one and only Wade today. Of course, with this being in Fayetteville and Raleigh, all this stuff has to we have to make adjustments, but we live and we learn, and I'm very excited to be talking today. So we are moving towards video podcast. We are moving to YouTube as well and putting that stuff up there too. We are open for questions. So if you are listening to a video, feel free to reach us out on our social medias for any questions you have for our special guest today. We are also looking for either twice a month or once a week, depending on what all is going on. Of course, right now we have Othello in the last couple shows the rest of this month. Richard III is in its final weekend, and we have Hamlet coming up next month. So depending on what all is going on and availability of everyone, we're going to be working towards that. But enough chit chat. We are here to talk today about Richard III. Oh my goodness. So first of all, I'd like to tell you, I did this last episode too. I would like for you to tell me about Richard III, about the plot and its original source and all that jazz, and your own words and stripped down and spark notes and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, Richard III is the fourth play in the first tetralogy that Shakespeare wrote. It happens historically in sequence after the other tetralogy, but it was written earlier, and it feels like that. Henry VI, parts 1, 2, and 3, and then Richard III form this set of four plays. Traditionally, I think it is the one of those four plays that is most often performed and talked about. The three parts of Henry VI are really convoluted and complicated and difficult. A theater company in Raleigh did do it a few years ago. They sort of combined all three plays into one sort of madcap 2.5 hour thing that was really interesting. But then they did Richard III again later, a year afterward. It does stand more or less alone as its own play, and it is the story of Richard of Gloucester, who is the new king's brother, and in the opening lines of the play announces his intent to become the king and to be a villain and to do whatever it takes to assume power. And whatever it takes in this case means betraying people, lying to people, murdering people, paying other people to murder other people, and just eating his way through the rest of the cast until there's only a few people left at the end. When he is crowned king, and then as historically happened, he is killed in the Battle of Bosworth Field. And at the very end, his killer, the victor in that battle, is all set to become King Henry VII.
Ooh, there's a lot. I love it, and I've also, of course, I'm no Shakespeare geek, but I'm very interested in the tetrality of the shows. Like that's something I've never heard of. Doing musical theater, it's always a one and done type show. So when I, started looking into a little bit more Shakespeare, like the having it a ever spanning story across multiple plays is something really fascinating. And so when you're directing this, do you feel like there's a necessary, like, because this isn't the first in the tetralogy, so do you feel like there's some necessary on the director's end of explaining anything, or do you feel like this, I know you said earlier this show is kind of a more standalone?
In the program, we have a note that summarizes what happened beforehand. But it doesn't involve the characters. It just involves the fact that there has been a civil war and now it's over. The characters in the play refer to a battle or two, and they refer to events in the previous play, such as characters being exiled and things like that. They refer to previous kings, but it's all sort of in passing. And I've seen this the first time I saw this play and read it, I had not learned anything about the previous events.
Gotcha. Well, good. That's really good though, because that means any audience can show up and they don't have to, be diehard fans or study it, and they can come out and enjoy a good show. And if they want to learn more, and then they got that little preface to it. Good. So with that being said, um, how many shows have you directed? And this doesn't have to be with Sweet Tea, but like, what's your history on that?
I think so. As a director, I've this is my sort of third venue. Many years ago, I was a high school teacher, and the high school at which I taught had its own theater program, and I was just teaching English. But I liked Shakespeare, and I said, I asked my students, does anyone want to do a Shakespeare play? And enough of them did that I sort of created a once a year Shakespeare festival, which was a play that we did once a year. So
Yeah.
in that capacity, I directed The Tempest, The Merchant of Venice, Hamlet, and Macbeth to high school students, and basically for a high school audience. And then more recently, I teach English at William Peace University, and I'm the program director for the theater department there.
Uh-huh.
And so in that capacity, I've directed another, I don't know, 7 or 8 shows, some Shakespeare, some not. And so this is the first time that I have directed a show in the community, but it's my 5th or 6th production with Sweet Tea, because I've been an actor with them since 2016 or so.
Excellent. So this is not your first rodeo by any
No, it's
stretch
not
of
my
the
first
imagination.
anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is one of like the biggest challenges with this production?
Well, with any Sweet Tea show or any sort of community theater Shakespeare, I think the biggest challenge is trying to decide the scale of the thing, because on the one hand, it is possible to do a great big Shakespeare show with sets and costumes that are historically accurate and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you can do it with no costumes and no set and nothing, and just a handful of people in a room. And the trick, I think, is to pick something in between that and figure out what you want to do. So,
Mhm.
and of course, that's what Sweet Tea, specializes in, figuring out where that is.
100%.
So, their production of King Lear that we did a few years ago had very beautiful and constructed, intentional, artistic costumes, and a set, but it was not historical. It was sort of its own time period, its own aesthetic that was created for that show. We did not have, we didn't need really the budget and the scale for that for this show, and so we've chosen to go almost as minimalist as possible. There's no real set. There are some set decorations on the stage, but it's a black box theater, and so we're going with a certain conceit about this play happening in Richard's memory and in his imagination. And therefore, the idea that the stage is empty and that we're sort of in Richard's head lends itself to having almost nothing on the stage. And then we have it set vaguely, I guess you could say, generically 20th century. So costumes are some combination of, or some version of, modern outfits with accents and things added and tweaked somewhat so that everyone looks a little bit different. But we're not all quite in the same, it's not the 20s or the 30s or the 60s. It's kind of a combination of times. Again, and we're writing that off by saying this is Richard's imagination. This is how he's thinking of it. Of course, that guy has a weird tie and that guy has a tuxedo, because that's how it works in his head.
So it's not exactly like true to the. I mean, it is, but it's more focused on Richard as a person and his perspective and the way he sees the world, and not exactly what it is.
Yep.
I love that. And I'm sure, yeah, that does sound quite challenging, having to find that balance and how to non-verbally communicate with the audience. Like, this is not what this is not what's really happening.
We're going for something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. I absolutely love that. Okay, so you mentioned in a pretty recent post that this production is very special to you. I'd like to ask you further in advance about like what would make it so special.
Well, first of all, as a Sweet Tea project, it's the first one that I've directed and not performed in. So that's already, being part of a company and stepping from one side to the other is a big deal. The thing that makes this particularly special is the cast and some choices that I made with the cast. Richard himself is played by David Henderson, and David and I have been literally doing theater together off and on since 1989.
Oh my goodness, you guys
We
got
met
some history.
met in college with a brand new musical theater company starting up. It's still going strong. The Pauper Players in Chapel Hill. We were in their very first show, and we just auditioned. Brand new company, didn't know each other, didn't know anybody. And then during our 3 subsequent years in college, we did 4 or 5 shows together. And then after we graduated, we did a few shows in the community. And then I moved away, and he moved away. We moved back, and we've since done a few more shows together with Sweet Tea. We've done Hamlet and King Lear and The Winter's Tale together. And so we were just talking last year, and I said, I think I'd like to direct something for Sweet Tea. Would you be interested in tackling this role? And so it has been for us, just a slightly new dynamic, because we've never directed one another before, even though we've both done plenty of directing.
Right.
And it is for now, at least, a culmination of, literally however many years that is, 32, 33 years that we've known each other. And so that's special. I also reached out to people in the community, and one of the people I reached out to goes back even further than that. Renee Wimberly, who is a local legend in all sorts of theater groups here.
Absolutely.
Runs her own place in town. She and I did our first show back in high school in 1986. And we have not done anything together since 1988. So to bring her back and to bring us together and have us work on a show literally for the first time in 34 years or whatever, really means something. And then the rest of the cast is a nice assemblage of people that I like and trust and reached out to. So people like Aaron Alderman, who is a Sweet Tea, regular.
Right.
And then, but then people that I've only worked with once. So the guy Tyler, who plays Catesby, we just did a show. We did the Odd Couple last year up here in Wake Forest, and he's never done Shakespeare before. And I said, how would you like to try it? Because I think you're really good. I think you have the right temperament for this. And then there are people that I've never met before who either auditioned or people put me in touch with, and so who are wonderful. And my thing about directing a show is half of it, 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it is simply getting the right group of people. And this cast is really special to me because of that, because it represents literally, on the one hand, a couple weeks for people that I just met, and it also represents 26 years in the case of Renee. So literally my whole theatrical life, in a way, is wrapped up in this.
That's insane, because it's not, of course, it's never just a show. It's never just a production. But in this regard, it's coming full circle with some people. It's a reunion with some people, and it's a brand new experience for other people. And it's someone's first Shakespeare show too. So like that's insane to wrap that all up in one production itself. And it seems to be working very well, because you got reviews out there. People are really liking the show, and so kudos to you. On a more personal note, what do you think, like outside of everything? Because of course I know your answer is obvious. If I ask you what's your favorite Shakespeare play, you're obviously going to say Richard III, this production, watch it now, right? Obviously. But what would be your second? I'd have to say is your favorite.
This is not my favorite Shakespeare play. It's my favorite Shakespeare play right now, because it's
of course.
It depends what mood you're in and what you're doing. I am very, very partial to Richard II and Henry IV Part 1, which we did in rep last year. Sweet Tea Shakespeare did this, and that was sort of a dream come true to be able to do those shows. I've never seen them performed except in film versions like The Hollow Crown, but I read them in college in that class with Dave Henderson, and they're just shows that I've always wanted to be part of. And so I like reading them, I like thinking about them, I like knowing about them, I like referring to them, and it was really nice to be able to do them last winter. And then, of course, I like all the famous ones. All the big tragedies, of course, are great.
Right.
But I think I always say that Richard II and Henry IV Part 1 are at the top of my list.
Gotcha.
At least because people don't expect them.
Yeah. I mean, because it's easy to hit you with a Midsummer or a Hamlet. Yeah. So, what do you think would be next for you on the docket? Like, would if there's something literal, absolutely say that. But like, even this could even be something that like you're interested in doing, or something maybe like a dream show.
Literal. I actually have something literal.
All right, go for it.
So, like I said, I tend to direct one show a year at William Peace University, and this year that show is Seamus Heaney's The Burial at Thebes, his recent version of Antigone. and I'm going to be putting that up in the same theater where Richard III is in March with
That's
a
exciting.
student cast. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have not. I've been at Peace for 16 years now, and I don't think we've ever done a Greek play. And this is a
Really?
slightly modern version, but it's still Antigone. It's still
Right.
that structure, those characters, that language just jazzed up a little bit. So
Right.
that's a teaching challenge that we've never had at Peace. And for me, I've only seen a few Greek plays and have never directed one. So figuring out how to make that work for the students and how to make that work for an audience coming to see it is a project that I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. So, and while we're saying that, let's make this a two-parter and say what would be a dream of yours. And this can be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It's whatever, like off the top of your head, you would love to be directing or be a part of in any way, shape, or form.
I have a bucket list of shows I'd like to direct just for sort of sentimental reasons or because they seem complicated. One of my weird dream shows to direct someday, believe it or not, is Carousel, the Roger and Hammerstein musical.
Really?
I don't enjoy sitting through Roger and Hammerstein's musicals the way I used to when I was a kid. And I have relatives that are very into that. That's their thing.
Yeah.
And but for some reason, Carousel is a little different. Carousel is darker to me. Carousel has a sort of Shakespearean feel to it, and I just really like to tackle it. And I'd like to, if we ever had enough, it requires a big cast, bigger than we usually get at Peace. But if we had that many students, I'd really like to try that. Another one like that seems ridiculous is the Pirates of Penzance. We're going to do a big musical. I really like comedy. I like directing comedy a lot. One of the joys of Richard III as a tragedy has been finding the sort of jokes in it. I assume everyone here watching this knows Jeremy. One of Jeremy's sort of rules is, and he's not alone in this, but if it's a comedy, look for the dark parts, and if it's a tragedy, look for the comedic parts. And
they're always there.
Yeah, plenty of jokes and funny things in Richard. But if I really wanted to and I've directed really big fun comedy. We did Noises Off a few years ago, which is just a rollicking slapstick farce for me. It was great fun, but there's a certain job there with teaching, especially students, with teaching them how the jokes work and how to play them. And I think doing a big just rollicking production of Pirates of Penzance would be great. In terms of Shakespeare things, somewhere in the back of my head, I did the very first show I ever directed was The Tempest, but now 30 years later, I'd like to tackle that again, knowing a lot more now than I did then.
Right.
I'd also kind of like to do something like As You Like It, something that's a comedy, but just barely.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time though.
One of those in between kind of shows.
Yeah.
And again, since I mostly direct for students, I think of that as much an education, a teaching job as a theater job. And so figuring out how to make that work and how to sell students on it and sell a collegiate audience to it is part of what sounds fun about that.
Absolutely. I think before I go forward with what I'm about to say about the Shakespeare dream stuff, I wanted to go touch back on that musical thing a little bit, because I remember growing up and I used to always eat up the dark stuff. So Into the Woods, Sweeney Todd were top tier. I loved it. All the Tim Burton movies and all that. And not a lot of people like that. They always like the Disney happy-go-lucky fun stuff. And then I know, right? And it's quality stuff. It's a good time. There's something about me when it talks about something grounded and something about what humanity is really like. I eat that up. I absolutely love it. And I thought I was so cool and so different. And then they made it Into the Woods movie and Sweeney Todd movie, and it started getting popular. And so about middle school, I'm like, I don't know about this anymore because it's popular now, and I'm not having as good of a time. But and that's just me being egotistical and all. But I remember at the peak of COVID, so of course summer 2020, me and everybody in my social circle, my sisters and fiance, everyone I knew was in the middle of a production. I was just kickstarting Midsummer Night's Dream, and when I auditioned, I also got casted in A Knight's Tale, or Two Noble Kinsmen. And I was cast as Arcite for that, and was super excited for it. And things just started trickling. We never met in person. We moved on to Zoom, and then we had to cancel it all completely. Same with the other shows that people were a part of that I knew. And I'm still butthurt and I'm still brokenhearted about Knight's Tale because that I read the script of that and I was just so enamored by that show, and especially our side. I don't know what it was, but there's something about our side that I really wanted to play. And I've also never been killed in a production that I've acted
Oh,
in. And
you got to do that.
I know, I just feel like I was just robbed of something. So that off the top of my head, 100% would be Two Noble Kinsmen. So if you put it on Up in Peace, I'll make trips. I'll make our trips just to play our
Keep that
side.
in
So
mind.
well, a little wink, wink. You know what I'm
Someone,
saying?
Bear Theater did that a few years ago. They did that
Oh,
show.
really?
Yeah,
Dang, missed my
outside.
opportunity then.
It's been a few years, so I'm sure people are ready for it again.
Yeah, right. So were you in the middle of a production during the COVID thing? Because I feel like there's just this curse. Every
No,
artist.
we had I had just that school year I had directed a production of Dracula that went way over budget, and the spring shows were the Spitfire Grill, which happened, and then a big production of Charlotte's Web that was canceled. And because my dumb show had gone so far over budget, I'm not quite sure what would have happened to our budget trying to finish out Charlotte's Web, so that worked out. But I wasn't working on that show, so for the next year during 2021, we didn't do any shows at my school, and that's so we sort of had a year off. I did some Zoom plays with Sweet Tea, but so nothing that I was well, that's not true. I was cast in a show at North Carolina State Theater Fest, but it didn't even get off the ground. We got cast and then it shut down, so I didn't have time to get wedded to it.
Right. So now I'm upset even more because you got lucky. You got the get out of jail free card on in your situation. We're all brokenhearted. We're all casted as dream roles, and we're all be doing things. We're bulldozing new environments, getting ready for already wedded immediately day one, and you're like, "Ooh, that was a close one. That would have been really bad." All right, well, we're running out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it here. I'm very excited to be able to see Richard III in its final weekend. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk today about Richard III. Anything you need to say about Richard?
The only thing I'll note is that we have one cast member who's going to be unable to join us this week. Well, we have two things. We have a cast change that's been planned all along. One role was double cast, and one actor played that role last weekend, and then a different actor is going to play that role this weekend. So even someone who saw it last weekend, if they liked it a lot and have a friend that wanted to see it again or see it with them and they wanted to see it again, should check it out because it's a somewhat different show with this different actor in that role. And then we have another actor who is just who is not going to be able to join us this week, and so we are going to work around, switch that role up slightly, rewrite it a little bit, and have someone else take over that part for them. And so we're sad about that, but it just means that the way theater works, it's always it's always a little fresh, and there's always some reason that that it feels new and that there's a new way to do it. And I'm sad that we're going to lose that actor this weekend, but it means that it's never stale,
Right.
Or especially these days, you never quite know what's going to happen, and we're going to hit it ground running, and the show is going to be fantastic, and we're going to think of that actor, and it's going to be wonderful. So
yeah, and if for audience members, I don't know how often this gets caught on, but if being from on the other side of the stage, if there's one cast change, if there's one person that gets switched out, it is a completely different show.
Yeah.
Like the dynamic is completely changed.
right.
And I don't know how that's transceived on the audience's side, but it's very apparent. So 100%.
Well, for the actor that we chose to do this for, that switched up, we rehearsed with both of them. So the actor that played the role last weekend and the actor that plays it this weekend have both been through rehearsals with everybody. And so in theory, the pace should be pretty similar, but of course they're very different performers. They bring totally different vibes to it, and they feel it differently. And so the fun of doing it always, which is looking that other person in the eye and reading them and doing what you're supposed to do, slightly differently day to day just because it feels different will of
Mhm.
course will of course produce a different energy, and that's why we're here, I think.
And that's 100% how it should be done in life theater. Thank you so much, Wade Newhouse, for joining me. And thank you all for joining us on this wonderful journey through everything Shakespeare, everything tea, and everything sweet in the world. Thank you so much and see you next time. Bye.
Thanks.